The writer of Hebrews 10 and verse 24, he exhorts us. He says that we should not give up meeting together. We should not give up meeting together. And if he did just put a full stop there, it would be bad and not so bad. But he made a comparison. He says that we should not give up meeting together as the manner of some is. There's an indictment against those who fail to meet and fellowship with the saints. And on a bracket says so. And the Bible says that. Christian fellowship is important. And the early church was what it was because they gave themselves continually to fellowship. And let us not forget the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. I am not here to tell you that there may not be instances where a person can't be gathered when the saints are gathered. And there are some that will work in essential services that will demand their time at the time that the church is gathered. But come on, man. There are too many of us take church for nothing. The fellowshipping of the saints is nothing. And I stand here to tell you this morning that a defining characteristic of the church, a central activity of the church when it was born and in its early days was the meeting together of the believer. Iron sharpeneth iron, and so does the countenance of one sharpens the other. There's some of us, if our fingernail break, we can't come to church. If breeze blow too hard, we can't come to church. It takes nothing for us to stay home. I call back the church. Let the church be the church. Let the church meet for fellowship. Give the Lord some praise if you hold on to the word. They continue steadfastly in the apostles' teaching and in the fellowship of the saints. You can see how both activities work together. Because when they go for fellowship, the word would have been taught. And I tell you today that many would have been better if they were coming to church. They would have heard a word. They would have heard a word. They would have been inspired by a brother or a sister. They would have been influenced by a brother or a sister. Their life would have been different. Thirdly, they continued. Third activity, they continued steadfastly in the breaking of bread. This activity points to the fact that the early church kept the work of the cross at the forefront of their mind. It points to the fact that the early church kept the work of the cross at the forefront of their mind. One preacher makes the point that nothing is more vital to the church's ongoing regular confrontation of sins in the life of its people than the thoughtful expression of devotion to the remembrance of the cross. Every time that you walk into a Lord's Supper service, you remember that you must live right. Now, I am not the type of preacher. In fact, I have a serious problem when a believer walk out of a Lord's Supper service have a serious problem. Because, one, sin should not stop you from taking the Lord's Supper. Because that's one thing that the Lord's Supper does. It confronts you with your life. It confronts you with the sins that are in your life. But the Bible says if we confess. So when a believer walk out of a Lord's Supper service, I am grappling with the thought, did this person confess and determine to turn? Because the only way you should walk out if you're determined to live in sin. And of course, you must examine yourself. And when you examine yourself and you realize that that's something I'm going to live, fine. So when you walk out, you're actually testifying that you have chosen to live a life of sin. Let it circle. Because as long as you mean well, and you see the table before you, you examine yourself. And you say, God, how can I partake of these emblems? I'm not living right. And you fall to your knee. And you say, God, have mercy on me. God, forgive me. God, cleanse me. God, wash me. God, turn me around. And you get up off of your knee with a determination to press forward. And you take the Lord's Supper. That's my conviction where the Lord's Supper is concerned. That one should examine himself thoroughly. But upon examination, adjustment must be made. And that's why the early church, they continued steadfastly in the breaking of bread. Because every time they break the bread, they remember the cross. They remember the sacrifice. They remember what God has done for them. Every time that they draw to the table, they remember that it's the cross that have brought them into relationship with God. But today, we tend to run. We tend to run. We tend to run. I grew up in an era where I took Lord's Supper with fear and trembling. It is said, and not no gosso. Well, me have no proof say anything gosso. Well, me have no proof say no gosso either. But it is said, when the cup drop out of your hand because you live bad life. That's the era me grew up in. Lord Jesus. Every time I reach for that cup, I say, God, no make it drop. God, no make it drop. No shame me today, no make it drop. That's the era I grew up in. People took Lord's Supper serious. And I want you to understand me. I've made a point already that as long as you're a child of God, you should draw to the table. But you clean up yourself. But I remember, because I never have it all together, I say, God, nobody embarrass me. Thank God it has never been dropped up to this point. I like today now, if you take a cup and you turn over, them just say, accident. You know, my day growing up as a child, young like somehow, you know, sin in your life. You now live right. The Holy Ghost backs it out of your hand. That's the era I grew up in. But what was behind those thinking was how important it is to live right. Because the Lord's Supper reminds us of the holiness of God. Can somebody talk to me here? It was all about holiness. Why do you wear white? Why do you wear white? Sometimes some tradition in church you don't understand. Well, me know that you can dirty and in a white. Me know that. That's why I'm not to emphasize on it. And I'm not against those who wear white also. But traditionally, we know that for Lord's Supper you wear white. Because white signifies purity and holiness. And as your garment is white, so should be your heart. As your garment is white, so should be your soul. Now watch me now. Now we could not miss Lord's Supper either. Because with shaking hands, you reach for that cup. You make sure you hold it good. But if you did not turn up to church and Lord's Supper, something wrong with you, you run from it. So we can't turn. Because if we not come as young Christian, we're not living right. So they're going to check up on us. And if we ever nervously, fearfully, try take up the cup, and out of your nervousness it drop, you're not living right. Now, my brothers and sisters, I am not saying that this is right, but what I want you to get from this is the level of respect, holiness that the church then places on the table of the Lord. You're not going to Lord's Supper service and laugh and chat on all of those foolishness. You're searching your heart. And you are saying to God, thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid. Thank you.